and I hunt for the meat that I eat. As you can see here, sometimes my meat hunts me.
In 2017, Sue Aikens took a stand. She filed a $500,000 lawsuit that nearly brought the show Life Below Zero to its knees. What the audience didn't know was that the show's producers had faked some of the most thrilling and dangerous moments for TV drama. Staged wolf attacks, fabricated bear encounters, and a crash that supposedly left Sue with a shattered collarbone. Yet the most shocking detail came from the executives, who casually referred to Sue as expendable. What viewers couldn't see were the battles Sue had been fighting behind the camera. Battles far more dangerous than anything Alaska could throw her way. When she finally spoke out, her revelations were so raw, they pushed 1/3 of the audience to vow they would stop watching. Sue was done being the show's pawn. But the story of Sue Aikens didn't begin on a reality show in the icy wilderness. It began in Mount Prospect, Illinois, on July 6, 1963. That summer, one of the hottest weeks in history, Sue's arrival into the world was anything but ordinary. Born to 19-year-old Nyoka, who had dropped out of school to marry Sue's father, Sue's early life was marked by a harsh reality. Her father worked long hours at a local factory, often returning home late, too exhausted to talk. Nyoka, in contrast, spent her days smoking and watching soap operas, sometimes forgetting to feed Sue. The apartment they lived in on Elm Street was small, and most of their money went toward rent, leaving little for food or anything else. Even as an infant, Sue was already learning the lesson that if she wanted to survive, she would have to figure things out on her own. As she grew older, the rumbles of her parents' arguments filled the air. At just over 2 years old, Sue witnessed a breaking point. During one of their fights, her father hurled a coffee mug at the wall, narrowly missing her mother. It was a loud and painful crash, signaling the end of their marriage. What followed was months of divorce battles, where Sue watched her mother struggle to make ends meet, counting every coin just to buy groceries. After the divorce, Nyoka received only $45 a month in child support. In their new home above a laundromat, the constant rumble of the machines was a backdrop to the hunger Sue felt every day. Her mother worked at a diner for barely more than $1 an hour. Left to fend for herself, Sue would climb kitchen counters to reach whatever food she could find, mostly crackers or peanut butter. On nights of desperation, Nyoka would take Sue to dig through dumpsters for vegetables. This is how Sue learned that survival wasn't pretty. Sometimes survival meant taking what the world discarded. At age 3, Nyoka remarried a man named Eddie. But Eddie was no savior. A heavy drinker, he consumed an entire case of beer daily. Their money flowed into cans of Budweiser rather than food or security. One night, when Sue was barely tall enough to see over the kitchen table, Eddie's fury exploded. He stabbed a knife into the table 17 times, his rage following a burnt dinner. Sue, terrified, crawled under her bed, clutching her stuffed rabbit, trying not to cry. A week later, Eddie destroyed her tricycle in another fit of anger, throwing it down the stairs. It was the last time Sue ever had a tricycle. Sue learned quickly to read the signs of Eddie's moods, the slight shake of his hands, the drop in his voice before an explosion. These instincts, honed in a home soaked in fear, would later help Sue survive the most dangerous wilderness. At 4, Sue's teacher noticed something was wrong. Sue couldn't read like the other children. Simple words danced on the page, and letters twisted and flipped. Diagnosed with dyslexia, Sue's struggles in school became a daily torment. The children mocked her, calling her Stupid Sue. In a parent-teacher meeting, Sue tried to write her name, but the letters came out backwards, jumbled. Her mother cried in front of the class. While other children played outside, Sue sat alone in a small room, receiving extra help. It was during this painful period that Sue made a choice. If she couldn't be smart on paper, she would become strong in life. She would survive, no matter the odds. Just before turning 5, Sue's family moved out of the city and into a dilapidated farmhouse in Woodstock. The house was surrounded by 3 acres of wild woods and had an old well that could swallow a person whole. Her mother worked long shifts at a chicken plant. Left alone, Sue took to the woods. She made traps out of shoelaces and boxes, catching her first mouse that summer. One afternoon, Sue got lost in the forest. She spent over 6 hours wandering, drinking from puddles, and eating wild berries. She learned to navigate by the sun and the animal tracks. One day, while trying to catch a raccoon, Sue ended up in the hospital with 3 deep cuts that required 8 stitches. But none of it scared her. If anything, it made her feel alive. That raw, visceral feeling, she craved it. Sue knew then that the wild would always be her refuge. When Sue turned 11, her mother made a decision that would change everything. At 2 a.m., Nyoka woke her children and threw grocery bags at them. "Pack your things. We're moving to Alaska." By 3 a.m., they were on the road. No explanation, no discussion, just gone. Sue went from city sidewalks to the frozen wilderness, a world so foreign and unfamiliar that it forced her to grow up fast. By 13, Sue was already learning to fly a small plane, Alaska's alternative to driver's education. She finished high school early, but returned later to take an Alaska history course to officially graduate. Sue's teenage years were defined by abandonment. She was left to survive on her own in one of the harshest environments on Earth, learning how to live in a place where winter could kill you if you weren't prepared. By 17, Sue had returned to Illinois for a brief period, working at Tony's Diner in Chicago. It was there she met Eddie Mallory, a construction worker who came into the diner every Tuesday for coffee and pie. After just 47 days, Sue and Eddie eloped. They moved to Fairbanks in 1981 chasing pipeline jobs, but the isolation and Eddie's drinking soon turned their small cabin into a prison. One night, after a fight, Eddie slammed Sue into the wood stove, leaving a scar that never faded. He began to track her every movement, controlling her, cutting her off from anyone who might help. Early in 1982, Sue found out she was pregnant. She hoped the baby would bring peace, but Eddie's violence only escalated. During one of their fights, he punched Sue in the stomach, causing her to go into premature labor at just 32 weeks. Their daughter, Joanna, weighed only 3 pounds and had to remain in the NICU for 47 days. Medical bills piled up, but Sue never pressed charges against Eddie. Terrified he would leave for good, she carried the guilt with her, blaming herself, even though it wasn't her fault. A year later, Eddie's headaches grew worse. Doctors initially dismissed them, but an MRI revealed the truth. Eddie had a stage 4 brain tumor. Sue became his full-time caregiver, administering morphine injections, feeding him, cleaning him, and working overnight shifts at a truck stop to pay the bills. Over 14 months, Eddie wasted away to nothing. On February 18, 1985, he died with Sue holding his hand. She was just 22 years old. The funeral was small, and the grief, though deep, was not surprising. Sue sold everything they owned for a mere $8,000 and bought a one-way ticket to the edge of nowhere. Her journey led her to Kotzebue, Alaska, where she set up a camp near a river with a rifle and little else. On her third night, a rabid wolf crept into her camp. Sue tried to shoot, but missed. Out of bullets, she grabbed a tent pole, tied a knife to it, and fought the animal off. After the brutal battle, she killed the wolf and skinned it herself. She traded its pelt for food. The locals, initially skeptical, began to respect her. She wasn't just another outsider, she was a survivor. Sue Aikens, at only 23 years old, had walked straight into the frozen jaws of Alaska's wilderness. In 1986, she began working as a fur trapper in the Brooks Range. Each day before dawn, she would trek alone into the biting cold, laying 50 snares and walking over 15 miles in deep snow. Temperatures often plummeted to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. There were no shortcuts, no easy ways. Sue would check each trap individually, sometimes crawling through waist-high snowdrifts. When she caught a lynx or a wolverine, she had to skin it immediately, even when her hands were so numb she couldn't feel the knife. On some nights, she would sleep in snow caves just to survive. By the end of the trapping season, Sue made only $2,000. barely enough to cover her expenses. But every frozen mile, every scar, taught her something invaluable about survival. And each one of those scars was a step toward becoming unbreakable. In 1989, Sue Aikens found herself in the heart of Alaska's oil fields, taking a cooking job at Prudhoe Bay. She cooked for over 100 roughneck workers, enduring the relentless heat from the industrial ovens, while the wind outside froze everything solid. It was an environment of extremes, but the cold wasn't her biggest threat. It was the men. One day, while she was preparing a meal, a foreman named Chuck grabbed her. Sue didn't flinch. She held a 400-degree skillet inches from his face and gave him one warning. The harassment didn't stop. It escalated into lewd drawings, sabotaged meals, and cruel insults. But Sue endured it all. Her response was to sleep with a knife under her pillow and keep a loaded .44 Magnum in plain sight. The harassment only made her stronger. She completed the contract, leaving with $8,000 in hand. But the lessons she learned about isolation, danger, and survival would stay with her forever. Not long after, Sue started her own guiding service, taking wealthy clients on 10-day hunting trips in the Arctic. It was during one of these hunts that she faced one of her most dangerous encounters. A drunk businessman from Milwaukee, trying to impress others, fell off a cliff, plummeting 15 feet. Sue found him hanging upside down, unconscious and bleeding. She had no rope to help him, so she climbed down with her bare hands, dragging him up despite dislocating her shoulder in the process. Even with her injury, Sue continued to guide the hunt for 6 days, her arm in a sling, but the businessman later sued her for the accident. Sue fought back, suing him for $12,000 and won. It was a hard lesson, one that taught her to never let intoxicated clients into the wild again. In 1992, Sue faced another setback. A lightning strike destroyed a cabin she had rented. But rather than giving up, she took matters into her own hands. Over the course of 6 weeks, she worked 18-hour days, hauling 200-pound logs, catching fish, eating berries, and trapping small game. She lost 25 pounds and battled infections from blisters, but she finished the cabin. A local paper ran a story with the headline, "Woman Builds Cabin Alone in Wilderness." This was the first time anyone truly began to understand just how unbreakable Sue Aikens was. The following year, Sue leased a rundown oil camp near the Kavik River. The lease cost her just $1 a year, a deal that sounded too good to be true. The place was covered in garbage, and bears roamed freely. But Sue wasn't deterred. One day, a black bear charged her out of the fog. She would later name him Marty. That first encounter made it clear. Sue wasn't just cleaning up a mess, she was entering a battleground. But she stayed. She cleared 42,000 acres of land and began turning the ruins into something livable. By 1995, Kavik had grown to include 10 tent platforms, and Sue was earning $50,000 a year from oil workers and hunters. She built a sauna out of scrap metal, but the first time she used it, she burned herself badly. Second-degree burns covered her legs. Sue fixed the design by adding insulation, and the sauna became a hit. That was how Sue operated. She got hurt first, so no one else had to. In 1997, during the oil boom, Sue expanded Kavik to 20 buildings. But with more people came more risk. One assistant, hired to help her run the camp, tried to assault her in the cookhouse. Sue fought him off and fired him immediately. After that, she installed bear-proof locks, not just to keep the animals out, but to protect herself from people as well. Trust was now an expensive commodity, one she wasn't willing to waste. By 1999, the state of Alaska tried to reclaim Kavik, claiming that Sue had violated her lease by investing over $100,000 in improvements. In court, Sue presented photos of her bloodied, cracked hands, a testament to years of hard labor. The judge sided with her, and she was allowed to stay. But Sue knew the land could be taken away at any time, and she was always ready for the next fight. By 2001, Sue had made Kavik self-sufficient. installing solar panels that reduced her fuel consumption from 250 gallons a day to just 10 gallons a week. But the following year, disaster struck. A flood destroyed half her supplies. Sue didn't wait for help. Instead, she used the driftwood left behind by the river to rebuild. Nature knocked her down, but she used its own power to build herself back up. Then came July 10th, 2007. At 3:30 p.m., while pumping water, Sue set down her rifle just 15 feet away. A 1,000-pound grizzly charged her. She had 4 seconds to react. The bear knocked her out, dragged her 30 feet, and mauled her for 20 minutes. It bit her arms 17 times, tore the scalp from her head, and crushed part of her skull. Sue survived by playing dead and soiling herself, a trick she had learned from native elders. After the bear finally walked off, Sue was left alone, bleeding, with 40% of her body torn apart. But Sue didn't give up. She crawled 75 yards to her rifle. With her hands shattered, she used her teeth to chamber around and fired into the air. She then stitched her own head shut with fishing line, duct taped her arms, and reset her hip by slamming it against a fuel barrel. Over the next 10 days, she kept the camp running. Guests came and went, never knowing their host had nearly died. She cooked, guided trips, and smiled for their cameras, all while checking her infected wounds with a mirror and living off protein bars. When they left, they wrote 5-star reviews, unaware that Sue had nearly left in a body bag. That bear attack changed everything for Sue. Her story spread, and by 2008, she received a $180,000 insurance payout. She used the money to build bear-proof fences around her camp. What could have been a tragic ending turned into a thriving business. Survival tours that cost $2,500 per person with a 6-month waitlist. In 2012, the Discovery Channel came calling. They put Sue on TV in their show Life Below Zero, paying her $60,000 per season. But despite the fame, the trauma stayed. Sue still hears the bear's breath in her dreams and keeps guns near every bed. Between 2008 and 2010, Sue built a wind turbine from old aircraft parts. She climbed 50-foot poles in -50 degrees Fahrenheit wind, enduring gusts that once knocked her down, shattering her ankle. She splinted it with birch and rope, then finished the job. The turbine saved her $8,000 a year, and it became another symbol of her indomitable spirit. In 2011, the state audited her. They claimed she had underreported income and demanded $15,000 in back taxes. To pay the fine, Sue sold her grandmother's wedding ring and pearl necklace. She testified in court, explaining how she tracked every dollar, how she worked 80-hour weeks in -60 degrees Fahrenheit nights, skinning game, and fueling generators. Eventually, she won the appeal, but the experience left a mark. Sue learned that the paperwork could destroy her life far faster than the wilderness ever could. In 2012, a wolf pack surrounded one of her clients. The hunter froze. Sue didn't. She stepped in front of the pack, firing a shot into the sky. One wolf slashed her leg. With no help for miles, she dumped gunpowder into the wound and lit it. The burns sealed the gash. It was the most painful half hour of her life. The hunter later called it the most badass thing he'd ever seen. Sue still carries the scars. In 2012, National Geographic producers flew over the icy wilderness of Alaska, searching for something real. They didn't want actors or drama queens. They wanted someone who truly lived the life others only pretended to capture. That's when they found Sue Aikens, running her remote Kavik River camp, 197 miles north of the Arctic Circle. When Sue appeared on screen in 2013, she didn't make an entrance with flair or fanfare. Instead, she was shown gutting an 800-pound bull moose with an old hunting knife. In the background, snow whipped through the air as Sue sliced meat from bone, explaining how her camp cost $500,000 a year to operate. Viewers were used to survival shows full of scripted thrills and hair and makeup. But Sue? She didn't fake a thing. Her knife was real. Her work was endless. By the end of the first season in 2013, over 1 million people tuned in every episode. Sue's scenes of dragging 200-pound caribou across the ice alone, with only a rope and a makeshift sled, left an impact. What most didn't know was that behind the scenes, Sue was fighting battles of her own. The producers pushed for more dramatic moments, bears, crashes, and life-threatening chaos. But Sue refused every time. She demanded they film her real 16-hour days, checking solar panels, fixing generators, and prepping for storms. When they pushed back, she threatened to quit. One episode captured her repairing a burst water pipe in minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit, hands numb, tools freezing within minutes. She talked the viewers through each step, and that unscripted rawness became the most watched segment of the season. No dramatics, just a woman in freezing silence, doing what needed to be done. By 2015, Sue Aikens was no longer just the tough survivor on Life Below Zero. She had become an icon. Paid $40,000 per season, her salary wasn't celebrity-level money, but it reflected the loyalty she had built among her viewers. That year, something happened that would push her into the viral spotlight. With no resupplies for 6 weeks and no deodorant left, Sue did something no one saw coming. On camera, she reached for bear spray. Yes, bear spray, and used it as deodorant. It wasn't just for laughs. She explained that capsaicin, the active compound in bear spray, kills odor-causing bacteria. 8 minutes of laughter, pain, science, and the grit of a woman who figured things out no matter what. It became a meme, a survival hack, and a point of discussion in forums and fan pages across the country. The incident drove the ratings up by 20%, but more importantly, it solidified her status as a woman who would never stop innovating in the wild. But the fun and viral moments weren't to last. In 2016, Sue's world took a darker turn. The state of Alaska started reviewing her camp lease, seeking to enforce new environmental regulations that could have ended her way of life. What viewers saw wasn't just survival anymore, it was confrontation. Sue didn't back down. She met with state officials in the bitter cold and presented documents showing how her camp pumped $180,000 a year into the local economy, providing jobs, supplies, and flights. She dared the officials to survive one winter in Kavik before they made any judgments about her operations. The standoff resulted in a compromise: seasonal inspections rather than outright shutdowns. Sue's determination earned her a People's Choice nomination and, in turn, a business boost. She launched a branded line of survival gear and guides. In just the first year, her merchandise raked in $320,000. Her refusal to back down turned into a business success, one that proved her resilience wasn't just about surviving the wild, it was about thriving despite the odds. By 2019, Sue had become something of a mentor to her fellow cast members, particularly the Hailstones. She wasn't just teaching them how to trap or fish. She was passing on crucial knowledge about survival, like the importance of eating raw seal blubber. She showed them how just 4 ounces could fuel an entire day's survival. The cameras captured it all. But true to form, Sue didn't soften her language for the cameras. She swore like a sailor. And when the editors bleeped her out 47 times during a single 20-minute segment, she simply shrugged. "This is real Alaska," she said, "not some theme park." Sue wasn't interested in faking moments for TV. What you saw was exactly what you got: raw, unfiltered, and unapologetically real. Then came the crash. On February 23, 2015, Sue was riding a snow machine across a patch of ice. A producer named Aaron Melman insisted she hit 60 miles per hour, even though she had warned him that the ice was too dangerous. She obeyed, trusting the crew's judgment. She crashed. The snow machine hit a ridge, sending Sue flying. Her collarbone shattered in 10 places, and her shoulder was ripped open. It was a nightmare, but worse than the crash itself was what happened after. The producers made Sue wait for 4 hours before they evacuated her. They filmed the entire time, capturing B-roll footage of her injuries while she bled and froze in minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures. She walked nearly a mile to the rescue plane, every step a scream of pain. She ended up with third-degree frostbite on her face and required skin grafts to repair the damage. The callousness of the producers was a bitter reminder that in the world of reality TV, human suffering was often just another shot for the cameras. In 2017, Sue sued BBC Worldwide, National Geographic, and Aaron Melman for the crash, demanding $500,000. The documents revealed the ugly truth about the show. It wasn't just faked drama like wolf attacks or bear encounters. The whole setup had been scripted, and Sue was being endangered in the process. She argued that what had started as reality TV had turned into deliberate endangerment. Her lawsuit uncovered the shocking lengths the producers had gone to. She won a settlement in 2018, but it came with strings attached. She was banned from appearing in seasons 6 and 7. When she returned in 2019, she dropped a bombshell on Joe Rogan's podcast. Executives had referred to her as expendable. That one word set the internet ablaze. Fans launched petitions, and 1/3 of the audience threatened to quit the show unless changes were made. Despite legal clauses that kept her silent, Sue decided to speak out, finally revealing the truth. By 2020, Sue's fight for survival had taken a new form. She began testifying before Alaska legislators, advocating for safety laws in reality TV. She spoke about how the crash had cost her over $100,000 in lost income and revealed that other cast members had suffered in silence. Sue's advocacy led to new bills that would require producers filming in extreme zones to have certified medical staff on set and provide legal protection for cast members who reported abuse. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for the future of all reality TV stars who faced similar dangers. But personal tragedy was never far behind. In March 2023, Sue's 20-year-old granddaughter, Drew, died unexpectedly. Cameras captured the raw emotion as Sue sobbed, holding a framed photo of Drew, unable to continue filming. The production halted for a full day, the only time that ever happened. That fall, the episode aired as a memorial to Drew. The heartbreak didn't stop there. On July 15, 2025, Sue's mother, Nyoka, passed away at 85. Just days later, Sue posted old letters from her mother, revealing years of hidden abuse. For the first time, Sue understood the silence, the coldness. Only months earlier, Sue had undergone major spinal surgery, fusing 3 vertebrae that had been damaged by decades of lifting, hauling, and surviving. Her spine, doctors said, looked like it had been in car crashes. But it wasn't. It was just Alaska. In February 2025, National Geographic announced that they were canceling Life Below Zero after 23 seasons. Sue's final episode aired on March 22, 2025. In that episode, Sue made a move that proved prophetic. She bought a $150,000 backup cabin at Chena Hot Springs. Just months later, the Munson Creek fire burned within 100 yards of her new place. Her footage, showing her frantically loading gear as flames closed in, became one of the most intense scenes in years. Over 12,000 acres burned, but Sue's cabin survived. The fire was another reminder that in Alaska, everything could change in an instant. But Sue Aikens wasn't the kind of woman who slowed down. Even at 62, Sue wasn't done. In October 2025, she teamed up with survival expert Michael Heinrich to turn Kavik into a wilderness school. They launched the Bear Survival Intensive, an 8-session course that ran from June to August. With 12 people per session at $2,500 each, the venture brought in about $400,000 annually. Despite more than 20 bone fractures over the years, Sue led every predator simulation herself. The deal was a 60-40 split, and Sue took the lion's share. She wasn't just teaching survival, She was living it every single day. Sue's memoir, Call of the Wild, published in 2024, sold 180,000 copies and hit number 3 on the New York Times list. In it, she told stories that had never aired on the show. Stories like The Time. In 2010, when 3 armed poachers camped just 200 yards from her cabin, she stayed hidden with a loaded rifle, snapping photos of their license plates from the shadows. Or the time she found a human skeleton near her property, a missing hiker from 2009. Hollywood came knocking, offering 6-figure deals for the film rights to her story. But Sue's battle with Alaska's Department of Natural Resources is far from over. The state wants to terminate her lease, citing $23,400 in unpaid fees and environmental concerns. Sue has poured $85,000 into fighting back. The state claims she violated rules by building unauthorized structures and hosting too many guests during filming. Sue argues that her $340,000 in improvements actually protected the land better. Wilderness groups have raised $12,000 for her legal fight, and the next big hearing is set for March 2026. The final verdict is expected by 2030. Through every hardship, every victory, and every setback, Sue Aikens has proven that her fight for survival isn't just about enduring the harsh wilderness of Alaska. It's about taking control of her destiny, no matter what it costs.